What if I told you there's a man in the Bible who never died? We're not talking about legend. We're not talking about myth. We're talking about a real biblical account documented in Genesis, about a man who simply disappeared from the face of the earth without seeing death. No tomb, no illness, no farewell, just a phrase that defies all human logic. Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. Today you will meet Enoch, the man who walked so close to God that he did not see death. And this is not just another exciting biblical story. This is the story of a spiritual secret so powerful that it literally broke down the barriers between heaven and earth. What did this man do? What was Enoch's secret that provoked a supernatural intervention from God? How does someone develop such a deep level of intimacy with the Creator that they are taken up alive? And the question that could change your life today, is this kind of walk with God still possible? Stay until the end, because there's a revelation about Enoch that few people know, and it will completely transform how you see your own faith journey. This story didn't end thousands of years ago. It's an invitation that's still open for you. There are only two men in all of biblical history who never experienced death. Two names, two lives, two divine exceptions recorded in the Holy Scriptures. The second was Elijah, taken up in a whirlwind of fire before witnesses. But the first was Enoch, and the mystery of Enoch is even more intriguing, because unlike Elijah, there were no witnesses. There was no chariot of fire. There were no disciples watching the moment of departure. Enoch was simply there, and then he was gone. People searched, they questioned, but he had disappeared without a trace. The Bible records its existence with disconcerting brevity, just a few verses in Genesis chapter 5. But within this short narrative, there is a statement that has traversed the centuries, carrying immense weight. Enoch walked with God 300 years, and walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Think of the magnitude of this. In a world where death was, and still is, the only absolute certainty of human existence, God made an exception, a supernatural interruption in the natural course of life, and that exception has a name, Enoch. But here is the question that drives this whole story. Why? What was it in this man's life that provoked such an extraordinary response from heaven? What was Enoch's faith that touched God's heart so deeply? The answer lies hidden in a simple yet devastatingly powerful expression, an expression that appears twice in the biblical account of him, an expression that defines not only who Enoch was, but who he became. And this expression can change everything you think about your relationship with God. But before we can understand the mystery, we need to know the man. Enoch was not born special. He was not a prophet of priestly lineage. He was not a king. He had no army. He did not build temples. He was, in essence, an ordinary man living in an extraordinarily difficult time. He lived in the seventh generation from Adam. His father was Jared, and he fathered a son named Methuselah, who would become the longest living man in biblical history, 969 years. Enoch was part of a lineage that connected directly to the first man created by God. But the world around Enoch was far from holy. The Genesis narrative shows us that humanity at that time was rapidly heading towards moral and spiritual corruption. Evil was spreading. Violence was growing. The distance between heaven and earth seemed to increase with each generation. It was in this context, surrounded by spiritual darkness, that Enoch began to do something radically different. Imagine the scene, the sun rising over valleys, still untouched by the destruction that would come in the flood. Enoch waking up, not simply to survive the day, but to seek the presence of God. He had a family. He had responsibilities. He had daily challenges like any other man. But something within him yearned for more. There was a spiritual hunger, a thirst for eternity, a deep desire to know the one who had created all things. And Enoch made a decision. He would not live only for the visible. He would live for the invisible. While the world around him was turning away from God, Enoch was drawing closer. While others were building their lives on sand, Enoch was building his life on communion. And that choice, that daily, constant, unwavering decision, began to transform him from the inside out. The Bible says that after Methuselah's birth, Enoch walked with God 300 years. This was not an isolated event. It was not a fleeting, mystical moment. It was 3 centuries of growing intimacy, of deep communion, of a spiritual life that deepened day by day. But how does one walk with God? Not physically, but from the heart. Not out of obligation, but out of desire. Walking with God requires first learning to listen to Him. And here's something many don't realize about Enoch. He lived in a time without scriptures, without established prophets, without a temple, without organized rituals. There were no sacred books to study. There was no structured faith community. It was Enoch and God, just the two of them. This means that Enoch's relationship with God was not based on outward religiosity. It was based on something much deeper, real connection. True communion, intimacy with God that sprang from a completely surrendered heart. Enoch learned to discern God's voice in the midst of silence. He developed a spiritual sensitivity that few around him possessed. While others lived only for what they saw, Enoch lived for what he heard in the spiritual realm. And this didn't happen overnight. It was a process, a daily learning experience. A constant discipline of placing oneself in God's presence and remaining there, not for minutes, but for hours, not for days, but for years, not for decades, but for centuries. Think about it. 300 years of uninterrupted intimacy, 300 years choosing God above all else, 300 years listening when the world cried out, 300 years learning the ways of the eternal while humanity lost its way. Enoch's profound spiritual life was not made up of constant, extraordinary events. It was made up of ordinary faithfulness that became extraordinary. It was made up of daily choices, choosing prayer when others chose distraction, choosing seeking when others chose conformity, choosing God's presence when others chose the presence of the world. And something began to happen, something invisible to human eyes, but powerfully real in the spiritual world. The closer Enoch drew to God, the more he became like God. The more he listened, the more he obeyed. The more he obeyed, the deeper the communion became, until a point was reached where the distance between Enoch and God was so small that it ceased to exist. And then the unthinkable happened. Enoch walked with God. 3 words that carry the most powerful secret of the Old Testament. 3 words that explain why Enoch was one of the men who did not die in the Bible. 3 words that reveal the kind of faith capable of breaking down the barriers between the natural and the supernatural. But what does it truly mean to walk with God? It's not just believing that He exists. It's not just following religious rules. It's not just attending sacred spaces or repeating empty words. Walking with God means living in sync with Him. It means your steps follow His steps. It means your heart beats to the rhythm of His heart. It means your will aligns with His will, not by imposition but by love. It's a two-way journey. God draws near to those who draw near to Him. God reveals Himself to those who seek Him with a sincere heart. And Enoch sought. Enoch drew near. Enoch walked. And here's something extraordinary. The Bible uses the same expression twice. Genesis 5:22 says that Enoch walked with God 300 years, and Genesis 5:24 repeats, Enoch walked with God. The repetition is not accidental. It is emphasis. It is confirmation. It is heaven saying this is what defines this man. While other men were defined by their achievements, wealth, or power, Enoch was defined by his fellowship. While others built earthly empires, Enoch built an eternal relationship. He wasn't perfect, the Bible doesn't say that, but he was faithful. He didn't give up. He didn't stray. Day after day, year after year, century after century, he chose God's presence above all else. And this constant choice generated an eternal consequence. If you're enjoying this exciting Bible story and want to continue discovering the secrets of Enoch, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Activate the notification bell so you don't miss any teachings that can transform your walk with God. Because you see, when you spend enough time with someone, something happens. You start to think like that person, to speak like them, to see the world as they see it. And Enoch walked with God for 300 years. 300 years absorbing the divine nature, 300 years being molded by holiness, 300 years leaving the earthly to embrace the celestial, until a moment came when Enoch was closer to heaven than to earth. And it was precisely at that moment that God made a decision. The Bible reveals something powerful about Enoch in the book of Hebrews. Hebrews 11:5 declares, "By faith Enoch was taken away, so that he did not see death. He was not found, because God had taken him away. For before he was taken away, he was commended as having pleased God." Read this again. Before being taken up, Enoch received a testimony. He pleased God. It doesn't say he was the most powerful man. It doesn't say he performed visible miracles. It doesn't say he led multitudes. It says something much deeper. He pleased the heart of God. And the following verse explains how. In fact, without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Enoch's faith was not a theoretical faith. It was not a distant or philosophical belief. It was a living, active faith that moved him daily into the presence of God. It was a faith that believed not only that God exists, but that he rewards those who seek him sincerely. And Enoch searched with all that he had, with all that he was, while the world around him lived only for the visible, food, comfort, fleeting pleasures. Enoch lived for the invisible. He saw what natural eyes could not see. He believed in what the logical mind could not comprehend. He trusted in the one whom the world could not recognize. His faith was countercultural, radical, absolute. He didn't need external proof because he had inner certainty. He didn't need human applause because he had divine approval. And there is something devastatingly beautiful about this. Enoch did not preach to crowds. There is no record of great sermons. There is no list of public miracles. But his life, his quiet and faithful walk, shouted louder than any words could. Because true faith doesn't need the spotlight. It only needs God. And when her faith became so pure, so intense, so aligned with the heart of the Creator, something unprecedented happened. Heaven could no longer remain silent. Eternity could no longer wait. God decided that Enoch no longer belonged to the earth. Imagine a Cena, a day like any other. Enoch wakes up. He takes care of his family. Perhaps he talks to Methuselah. Perhaps he walks the same places as always. But inside him, as every day for the last 300 years, there is a constant search. The presence of God. He prays. He worships. He walks in fellowship, and then something changes. There are no thunderclaps. There are no chariots of fire descending from the sky. There are no angels announcing the moment. There is only a transition, gentle, supernatural, definitive. Enoch is walking with God on earth, and suddenly he is walking with God in heaven. The Bible says simply and profoundly, God took him for himself. It wasn't death that took him. It was God. It wasn't illness. It was divine will. It wasn't the natural end of a life. It was the supernatural interruption of heaven upon earth. And notice the language. God took him to himself. It wasn't just a rapture. It was an act of loving possession. It was God saying, "This one is mine. He has walked with me for so long that now he will walk with me forever, and there will be no more separation." People searched for Enoch. They asked questions. Where is he? Where did he go? But there was no earthly answer, because Enoch was no longer in the earthly realm. He had crossed the boundary between the temporal and the eternal. He was alive. He became one of the people God took without passing through death. And this was not just a personal gift for Enoch. It was a divine declaration to all of humanity. It was God saying, there is life beyond what you see. There is communion so profound that it breaks the rules of nature. There is a kind of faith capable of touching heaven while still on earth. Enoch didn't just disappear. He became a living prophecy, a sign, a promise that death doesn't have the last word for those who walk with God. And the mystery of Enoch continues to resonate. If God did it once, can he do it again? What happened to Enoch has a theological name, rapture. And this is not an isolated concept in Scripture. It's a theme that runs throughout the Bible, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. Enoch was the first, Elijah was the second, and the Apostle Paul speaks of a future rapture in 1 Thessalonians. But Enoch's rapture is unique because it happened before the flood, before the law of Moses, before the prophets, before everything. It is the earliest proof that God can and does make exceptions for those who live in radical communion with him. What is rapture? It is the supernatural transfer of a mortal body to the eternal dimension without going through the process of death. It is God saying, "You are so close to me that I will take you to where I am." And that changes everything. Because if death is the universal consequence of sin, as Romans 5 declares, then Enoch's rapture is an anticipated victory over that consequence. It is eternity invading time. It is life conquering death even before the resurrection of Christ. Enoch did not see death. He did not experience the separation between body and spirit. He was not buried. He simply passed, conscious, alive, whole, from the presence of God on earth to the presence of God in heaven. And here's what few realize. Enoch experienced this reality not through his own merit, but through faith. Hebrews makes this clear. It was his faith that pleased God. It was his faith that generated the divine response. It was his faith that broke through the limits of the natural. And that same faith is still available. The God who took Enoch is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The principles that governed Enoch's life, fellowship, constant seeking, active faith, daily walk, are still valid. They are still powerful. They still produce eternal consequences. Enoch's rapture is not just a story. It's an invitation. It's a promise. It's a revelation that God rewards those who seek him with absolute sincerity. And the question remains, are you walking with God or just believing in him from afar? The story of Enoch was not confined to Genesis. It has spanned centuries. It has inspired generations. It has become an essential reference when discussing faith, intimacy with God, and a deep spiritual life. Enoch is cited in Hebrews as one of the heroes of faith. He is mentioned in Jude as a prophet who announced judgment. He is remembered whenever someone asks, is it possible to live so close to God? And the Bible's answer is clear. Yes, Enoch is proof. He lived in a time without religious structure, without an organized faith community, without sacred books, and yet he developed the deepest relationship with God recorded in the Old Testament. This means that intimacy with God does not depend on external circumstances. It depends on an internal choice. Enoch chose to seek. He chose to listen. He chose to obey. And these choices transformed him from an ordinary man into an eternal example. Think about the impact of this. Generations after generations study his life. Preachers use his story to inspire faith. Theologians analyze his rapture to understand the mysteries of the Old Testament. And believers around the world look to Enoch and wonder, can I walk with God like that? The answer is yes, because Enoch was not superhuman. He was human, with weaknesses, with limitations, with challenges. But he made a choice to put God above all else. And that choice changed not only his life, it changed his eternal destiny. Enoch and God were not merely acquaintances. They were intimate. It wasn't a formal or distant relationship. It was real, living, constant communion. It was Enoch knowing that God was there, not through doctrine, but through experience, not through tradition, but through presence. And the legacy he left behind is simple, yet devastating. You can walk with God so closely that heaven becomes more real than earth. Now comes the most important part. What does the story of Enoch mean to you? Because this is not just an ancient narrative. It's a mirror. It's an invitation. It's a spiritual provocation that spans the centuries and reaches the present moment of your life. Enoch lived millennia ago, but the principles that guided his journey are timeless, and they are available now for you. Walking with God is not a privilege reserved for a select few. It is an open invitation to all who desire it. It does not demand perfection. It demands spiritual hunger. It does not demand the absence of flaws. It demands a constant presence in the pursuit of God. Enoch teaches us that intimacy with God is built in everyday life, not in isolated mystical moments, not in fleeting emotional experiences, but in the daily, constant, faithful choice to seek God's presence above all else. He teaches us that a deep spiritual life isn't about doing grand things for God. It's about being with God. It's about communion. It's about a real, living, transformative relationship. He teaches us that the faith that pleases God is not the faith that shouts in the crowds. It is the faith that walks silently, but with firmness. It is the faith that does not give up when no one is watching. It is the faith that perseveres not for human applause, but for divine conviction. And here is the truth that can change your spiritual journey today. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to be eloquent. You don't need to have extraordinary visible gifts. You only need one thing: to seek God with all your heart. Enoch shows us that when you do this, when you truly, genuinely, passionately seek God's presence, something supernatural begins to happen. You are transformed. Your life is transformed, and heaven responds. Perhaps you won't be raptured like Enoch, but you will experience the same principle, a closeness to God that breaks through the limitations of the natural world. And this is the spiritual message that Enoch left for us. God is not distant. He is waiting for you to draw near. He is waiting for you to choose to walk with Him, not just to believe in Him, but to live with Him. The question is, will you accept this calling? We return to the beginning. Enoch never died, and now you understand why. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It wasn't arbitrary favoritism from God. It was the natural consequence of a supernatural life. It was the result of 300 years of uninterrupted communion. It was the divine response to a faith that touched the invisible. Enoch walked with God until the distance between them ceased to exist. And when there was no more separation, God simply took him to where he was. And this is Enoch's most powerful legacy. He left behind no empire, no riches, no monuments. He left behind a question that echoes through the millennia. How far are you willing to go in your search for God? Because Enoch went all the way. Literally, he walked so close to God that he crossed the boundary between time and eternity without seeing death. And this biblical story reminds us of something the world tries to make us forget. There is life beyond what we see. There is purpose beyond what we touch. There is eternity beyond what we measure. Enoch is living proof, or rather eternally living proof, of this truth. Men who didn't die in the Bible aren't mythological figures. They are real witnesses that God can do the impossible, that faith breaks down barriers, that communion with the Creator generates consequences that defy human logic. And if you've stayed this far, perhaps it's because something inside you resonates with this story. Perhaps you too feel this hunger for more, this thirst for depth, this desire to walk so close to God that nothing else matters. This is Enoch's legacy, and it is available to you, not as a promise of immediate physical rapture, but as an invitation to a life of such real intimacy with God that heaven becomes present here now, in the midst of your circumstances. Enoch didn't just disappear. He left a marked path, an open invitation, a powerful revelation. When you walk with God, nothing, not even death, can separate you from Him. And that is the most beautiful promise there is. So what are you going to do with this story? You met Enoch. You witnessed his journey. You understood his secret. You discovered that the faith capable of touching the invisible is not distant or unattainable. It is within reach of those who choose to seek it. Enoch's profound spiritual life did not spring from a single mystical experience. It was born from daily choices, from constant communion, from unwavering faithfulness. And today you can begin your own journey. You don't need to wait for perfect circumstances. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to take the first step. Choose to seek God's presence above all else. Pray not as an obligation, but as an encounter. Read the word not as a task, but as a revelation. Live not only for the visible, but for the eternal, because the God who walked with Enoch wants to walk with you. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below saying, "I will walk with God." Subscribe to the channel to continue receiving exciting Bible stories that strengthen your faith. Turn on notifications and share with someone who needs to hear about the man who walked so close to God that he did not see death. Your journey doesn't end here. It begins. Enoch left a legacy, and now it's your turn to live that legacy. To walk with God not just in theory, but in real, living, transformative experience. May the story of Enoch be more than just inspiration. May it be transformation. Go, seek, walk, and discover, as Enoch discovered, that God rewards those who seek him with all their heart.